Hey, DawgNation, happy Monday to you. Hope you had a fantastic Easter yesterday. And for those of you who have kids who are kind of moving into spring break week, hope you're getting ready for a lot of fun. You may be on the road, traveling, whatever else. No matter what you're doing, thank you for bringing DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, with you wherever you go. Boy, you talk about, no sleepy day after Easter show for us. Big news in the Tykee Smith front. Also reaction to what did and maybe didn't happen at the Georgia scrimmage on Saturday, at least based on kind of ear to the ground stuff and what Kirby Smart himself said after that was all said and done. John Stinchcomb on hand. I was part of a great event this weekend. I'm going to tell you more about that before we're done on today's program. We're as jam-packed as it could possibly be here as we roll through the spring. It's DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. It begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
I don't think that I'm breaking new ground if I say that at times Georgia seemingly runs a fairly secretive football program. Kirby Smart sometimes likes to keep his cards close to the vest. Sometimes he doesn't say what he might be thinking. Sometimes he says something and you think he might actually be thinking something different than just the bold print text of his words would lead you to believe. And you're kind of always kind of left with that kind of guessing game. And to a certain extent, I think that that's certainly Smart's prerogative to kind of, keep things in-house as much as he wants to. It's why I'm always kind of amazed at when something kind of takes place out in the open, very easy to understand, very easy to process and track with. And I think that's been kind of the scenario with Georgia when it comes to its defensive secondary situation as we move through the spring. Coming up in just a moment, we'll get into the big news of Georgia adding what I think is a very big-time player here. But as we kind of get to that, let me set it up this way. When Smart was asked in kind of very clear terms on Saturday after the first scrimmage of spring, something that he saw, the reporters on hand who were questioning him had not had a chance to see, kind of how he evaluates the play of his secondary thus far this spring. In a short, terse quote, Smart didn't really pull punches or hold back on exactly how he sees that group right now with so much to replace. This is what Smart said on Saturday.
I would assess that we have to get better. We are not where we need to be. We're not where we need to be in terms of defensive back play.
So that's another example, as I said before, of this, out in the open, very clear. You can't really interpret that a different way. And I think for most of us who follow this team pretty closely as fans or, people who kind of do this thing for a living, it all makes sense, right? I mean, Georgia had, Richard LeCount, safety, who had played so much for so many years for Georgia. Guys like Tyson Campbell and Eric Stokes, guys who are going to be really high draft picks coming up in this year's draft. Obviously, when you have all of that, and not to say nothing of, guys like DJ Daniel and Mark Webb and all the other guys who kind of filled out those positions for Georgia as of late, you take those guys off a roster and the guys behind them, no spring practice a year ago. You didn't have the, kind of FCS group of 5 opponents a year ago, which a lot of times gives you a chance for extra experience for your next generation players. You didn't have a lot of that kind of stuff. We knew, it was just obvious. You don't have to be an insider to the program to know that Georgia was going to have issues with its defensive secondary in terms of who all needs to be replaced. You knew that starting in the spring, one of the big storylines was the work that was going to be done to get better in that regard. And as we've said on the show before, that really there's 2 different ways to do that work. You can do the work with the guys you have on the roster, coach them up, train them up, prepare them, get ready to go, and to allow those guys to be the players that you trust to get it done this season. Obviously, pass defense is as important, more important than it's ever been in college football before. So therefore, if you trust the guys you have, then get them ready and go to bat with them. But the other way in which you can get better, in addition to developing the players you have, you can reach outside the program and go bring somebody else in. And we said on the show that if that's what Georgia wanted to do, we'd kind of obviously support that. It's never a bad thing to add another good player, but if Georgia felt like it was good with what it had, then more power to them on that front there as well. Based on the evaluation that you just heard from Kirby Smart, it sounds like he thinks he needs some veteran help, and everybody would obviously understand why that is, and lo and behold, here's what Georgia goes out and does. Most of you are aware of this by now. Tykee Smith, the former, we'll call him All-American defensive back from West Virginia, a guy who was kind of touted that way by the Football Writers Association of America, by Associated Press, by by Pro Football Focus. Tykee Smith putting it on Twitter yesterday on Easter. That's the same mission, just new location for him as he's ready to go out there and play at the University of Georgia. And I don't have to tell most of you this. You already know this. This is a very big get for Georgia. Go back and read a lot of things that have been said about Smith going back to his last year at the Mountaineers. West Virginia played better defense last year in the Big 12 than that conference has seen in quite some time. And the work that Jamal Adai as defensive backs coach and guys like Smith there as a defensive back, the work that they did on all of that is certainly commendable. Smith's been praised as one of the best kind of slot defenders in coverage in the country a year ago. Pro Football Focus has said that. We've all written and talked about that a million different times here around DawgNation. So there is no doubt that Tykee Smith is a big-time player, and there is no doubt that Smith helps Georgia in an area in which it desperately needs some help, which is increasing its cover skills and adding more experience to the secondary. That's exactly what Tykee Smith is going to be able to provide. This is very good news for Georgia, big news that Tykee Smith was added. And as a way of kind of punctuating exactly why, let me let you hear another moment from Kirby Smart from the press conference on Saturday. This is obviously pre the announcement that Tykee Smith is joining UGA, but when Smart went into a little bit more detail at a different point in the press conference about exactly what he'd seen from his secondary thus far, you get the sense why reaching outside the program to someone with all-American credentials like Tykee Smith was the move that Georgia wanted to make. This Kirby Smart again.
I get to see those young secondary guys every day, so I feel like today was no different. We got to challenge them in terms of the coverage situations we put them in. A lot of them, it was their first real live action, with LC out there playing some corner and Allen and Keeley. Just a lot of young guys that haven't played a lot of college football. They play a lot of football, and they're good football players. But we're a long way from being ready in terms of what we need to do in the secondary because we just got a lot of inexperienced players. We cannot have enough of those situations, scrimmage, passing, all the different looks we get because we need the experience.
Yeah, so listen, obviously by adding Tykee Smith, you're not saying the players already in the Georgia roster are less important. As Kirby Smart says, we're still going to be working them up, developing them, getting them ready to play too, because they got to play alongside Tykee Smith. But obviously Smith adds, to the mix here for Georgia because he has the experience and because obviously he's got the the cover credentials. Frankly, you watch a lot of these guys who are getting ready to move on the NFL, receivers, things like that. You watch a lot of the highlights you see this time of year, or just think about the overall offensive explosion that takes place in college football. So much of that takes place because of kind of what's done over the middle, the way that slot receivers are now so prolific in college football. And a lot of times the draft experts, things like that, will tell you because sometimes they're taking advantage of soft coverage, the guy who's kind of tasked with defending that slot wide receiver, that sort of nickelback star, whatever you want to call it, spear, I guess it was called, in the West Virginia defensive scheme that Tykee Smith was a part before, as one of those guys who does some of that coverage over the middle. That's not always a solid cover guy for every program around the country, but by adding Smith to the mix here at Georgia, obviously Georgia, who has been strong in this regard before, you think you have a chance now kind of remain strong, if not take a big step forward by adding someone who played as well as Smith did a year ago. The other thing is, to me, it's almost the exact opposite of what happened when George Pickens got injured for the wide receiver situation. This is almost like the exact opposite, 180 degrees different scenario the other direction. When Pickens, who has experience and who has talent, was taken off, at least for now, with the ACL injury, when he was subtracted from that wide receiver room, all of a sudden everybody had to move up one chair over. All of a sudden now you're asking a less experienced player to kind of fill a void that Pickens would have filled, or maybe someone who's not quite as experienced as what Pickens brings to the table, or maybe not quite the same talent profile overall to kind of step up and do a little more this upcoming year. Everybody kind of moves over in one spot. All of a sudden now you're asking just a little bit more from everyone on the roster there in that situation. Well, by adding Tykee Smith into the defensive back room, all of a sudden now you're doing the other thing, right? You're telling everybody, now I can take a little pressure off of you. Guy who hasn't played very much, all of a sudden you've got a guy next to you who has played a lot. That gives you a chance to have some growing pains, to gain some experience just slightly outside the spotlight. Guy who's trying to learn how to do this at the SEC level, hey, lean on this guy who's done it at major college level before. The job for every Georgia defensive back gets just a little bit easier. So by bringing in Tykee Smith, you're not saying the other players don't matter. You're saying the job of making sure you matter as much as you need to by the season is done is just a little bit easier. And it's all been going on right there for us to see and observe. We knew that the Georgia secondary was going to be a challenge, replacing all the talent that needed to be replaced there. The work is ongoing during Georgia practice to get those guys ready to play, but now they know they'll also get some help in the way of Tykee Smith. This is a very good day for UGA. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Hello to you, and thanks for being with us no matter how you get to us today, live on video, 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We're on the radio at noon and at the Sports Radio 960 The Ref, and we're available as a podcast wherever you find them, including the world-famous DawgNation.com. Just really happy to have you with us. By the way, big thanks to our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia, my friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making all this possible. Great stuff they do when it comes to all the terrific stuff when it comes to, more energy-efficient windows and doors. That's all really, really important. Pella takes great care of you on that. They are a national company with a local branch right here in Georgia. That means you get the best of both worlds. You get the resources that come from a nationally known company, but the service that comes from a family-owned branch right here in Georgia. You just get all of that. And with the air conditioning is about to be working overdrive as we head towards the spring, keeping that energy inside your house, a really good thing. Looking good on the outside, that's a great thing there too. Also, don't forget this. Right now, Pella's offering 10% off an entire project or 0% APR for 24 months. Great deals on both those fronts. Really easy to get in touch with my friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia there as well. You can do one of two things. Go to the website, pellaofga.com/DawgNation. That's pellaofga.com/DawgNation. Or you can reach out and talk to the Pella team on the phone, 678-638-1496. 678-638-1496. Just make sure you tell them the DawgNation sent you. BA from DawgNation Daily said that they would take really good care of you, because I know they will. Check out Pella Window and Door of Georgia today. All right, we're going to get John Stinchcomb here coming up in just a couple of moments. We'll talk more with him about the addition of Tykee Smith here. Big time get for Georgia, All-American defensive back, locking down, helping to anyway, one of the real question marks about Georgia before it begins the upcoming season. Kirby Smart, this program, Jamal Adai, the new defensive backs coach, striking in a big way to add a big piece of talent. We'll talk to John Stinchcomb more about that. But as we go around the doghouse right now, I want to address something else related to the Georgia situation. Our buddy Terrence Edwards, the terrific Georgia wide receiver, got a chance to be at practice on Thursday. Many of you have been kind of tagging him on Twitter, reaching out to me. Terrence had shown some pictures of he and his brother Robert going through the Georgia, watching the Georgia practice, and a lot of folks were saying, "Hey, Terrence, what did you see when you were there? Tell us what went down." And folks would reach out to me saying, "BA, when Terrence is back on the show again," and of course Terrence will be with us this Thursday as he has been now for a while. Hey, make sure you ask him what he saw at Georgia practice. Well, Terrence kind of sensing some of this conversation was out there, the great former Georgia wide receiver, putting it out on Twitter, and I think we'll show this to you here. He says, "I had a lot of people reach out to me and ask after me after I went to the Georgia practice on Thursday trying to get information." Well, here's a tidbit for you, Terrence Edwards says on Twitter. Adonai Mitchell is going to shock a lot of people. Wide receiver signee for the class of 2021. Terrence Edwards liking what Mitchell brings to the table, and it really brings to mind for me what Terrence tweets there, something that he said to our recruiting insider Jeff Santel in a series of videos they did not too long ago, kind of profiling these Georgia signees. Terrence back in this video explaining a little bit why of maybe it is that he liked so much what he saw from Mitchell when he had a chance to observe practice last week. Really good eyewitness account from Terrence Edwards right there. A little more detail about what he said to Adonai Mitchell in the past about maybe what Georgia is getting in a receiver right now that so far this spring is really earning a lot of buzz. This Terrence Edwards and Adonai Mitchell.
One thing that I noticed about Adonai is he's very twitchy to be 6'3", 190 pounds. He runs routes. I mean, when you talk about being able to drop your weight, and for a big receiver, he able to drop his weight and get in and out of breaks. And after evaluating his film, he, to me, looks just like Jordan Jefferson of LSU coming out of high school. And we all know Jordan Jefferson wasn't a highly recruited prospect coming out of high school. He's maybe a 2 or 3 star. Now you see what he's doing now in the NFL. And if you go back and watch him, he high points the ball very well. He has good, strong hands. He's a long-range receiver, and he is a good route runner to be 6'3", 190 pounds.
I mean, I think it's really interesting, the comparison to Jefferson from LSU, and it is true. LSU made a star out of him in a way in which that his recruiting profile maybe wouldn't have suggested as a possibility. And obviously, Jeff Sentell talked about Adonai Mitchell when he joined us Friday on DawgNation Daily, and this buzz has been out there. Terrence Edwards kind of giving a little bit of an explanation as to perhaps why. Really interesting. Of course, that's kind of the good news on the side of things when it comes to the Georgia wide receiver situation. The bad news, maybe another bullet dodged in terms of another wide receiver injury that turns out not to be maybe as serious as it could have been. Obviously, there was a lot of hand-wringing from Georgia fans on Saturday related to something that may have happened with Arian Smith during practice, a wrist situation, on the heels of what had a lot of Georgia fans worried a week ago related to Jermaine Burton and a little bit of a minor knee thing that he was kind of dealing with. Kirby Smart was not in a good mood to talk about any of this after the practice on Saturday, thinking that way too much has been made of the recent spat of wide receiver injuries there at Georgia. Kirby Smart kind of not pulling any punches about his dissatisfaction about this conversation from the scrimmage on Saturday.
You guys got to do your job, but y'all certainly overreact to a lot of things. I was really disappointed at the way everything was handled. Jermaine Burton is fine. He has no structural damage. He was out there today doing exercises, doing conditioning, doing different things. Jermaine Burton's going to be fine. For anybody to report the length of time he's going to be out, that's really unfair, because if our doctor and our team doctors don't know that, I don't know how anybody else would, because they would have seen the MRI, they would have seen the x-rays, and there's nobody else that has seen that. So it's unfair to put misinformation out there for sure. Then with Arian today, he sprained his wrist and he should be fine. I don't know if he'll be back Monday. I don't know that. We're still doing the x-rays, but I know he sprained his wrist. So let's don't have a lot of overreaction, if you don't mind. And hey, you ask me, I tell you, Jermaine hyperextended his knee. He's day to day. That's what it is. It's not anything past that. But I don't think that we should sensationalize the other things, because it's all part of football.
So in that situation, Kirby Smart, very, very clear about how he feels about the Smith situation from Saturday, Jermaine Burton from a week ago. I think Georgia fans, who really the ones that had the questions related to Burton, Smith, and everything else, I think they're just happy to know that maybe these injuries on the heels of what happened to George Pickens a couple weeks ago, not as serious as they otherwise could have been. And obviously, when you add to that, buzz for guys like Justin Robinson and Adonai Mitchell, who you just heard Terrence Edwards talking about, all of a sudden you start to feel maybe a little bit better about a Georgia wide receiver room that seemed at one point in time, down after the George Pickens injury. Maybe the outlook's still pretty good for this group as we head towards the rest of spring with G-Day looming on April 17th. This is Around the Doghouse here on DawgNation Daily. By the way, before I say hello to John Stinchcomb today, let me tell you about my friends at Event Buzz Media. Here around DawgNation, one of the things that we've learned is there's really no better way to tell the story for a business than what you're able to put out on video. And so many of the folks who are watching us each and every day, small business owners themselves, and they want to get their marketing message out, and video is the way that you can get that done. And if you want to take your video stuff for your own company to the next level, Event Buzz Media, great way to do that. They can boost your social media presence. They can help you with corporate events, training videos, stuff for YouTube, even short film, feature film type production, whether it be music, sports, anything else to go along with that. Of course, Event Buzz Media, owned and operated in Georgia by an avid DawgNation reader, DawgNation Daily listener and viewer, multi-time Golden Shoe winner, our buddy Ben Green here. These are good dog people doing good stuff for the small businesses right here in Georgia, helping you tell your story on video. No more important marketing message than that right now. He'll talk some dogs with you, but more importantly, he'll talk about your business and how video can help take it to the next level. So please check him out online. It's eventbuzzmedia.com. That's eventbuzzmedia.com, or give him a call, 423-667-0555. That's 423-667-0555. Check out Event Buzz Media today. All right, it was a busy weekend around the SEC. We'll cover that before we're done. I was also a part of a tremendous event over the course of the weekend there as well, honoring a former UGA great. I'll tell you about that before the show is done today there as well. So that's all on the way. But for now, for everything going on around UGA, let's get ready to say hello to John Stinchcomb here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
We'll say hello to John Stinchcomb here today. Great to have him. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And John, before you joined us, we're talking about the big news of the day. It's one of those things that seems obvious in Georgia's move to go out and correct this issue or address this issue seems very direct, very bold. Georgia needs experience in secondary. They need guys who have those cover credentials, and to be able to bring in a guy like Tykee Smith, to be able to add in a guy who from West Virginia kind of had what I'll call, all-American credentials, Football Writers Association, the Associated Press. He was a semifinalist for the Thorpe Award. To me, this is a big-time get for Georgia at a true position of need. A lot to celebrate for Dog fans, I would say, today.
Well, isn't it amazing what a difference a week makes? Because last week we're worried because the Pickens injury and the potential for the Burton injury, and now you get the great news that an All-American cornerback for a position of need is going to be a part of this team. And, man, what a big addition that is. Admittedly, I am not a fan of the transfer portal, but we certainly have been a great beneficiary of it this week. It's funny. It's going to be a part of, if it's not already, it already is. It's a part of the college football landscape, and Coach Smart said in the past that they're going to be pretty particular and how they use it and ways that they go about adding players through the transfer portal. And this is a big time get. I think there's very good reason that Georgia fans are excited about Tykee Smith being added to this room.
One of the things I've talked about is, and listen, I don't try to pretend to be a scout. I don't try to be more than I am when it comes to stuff like this, but as I said before, I hear draft scouts say this time of year, that when you're trying to evaluate slot receivers, things like that, sometimes you have to be careful in your evaluation because what kind of cover guy was he doing this stuff against? In certain levels of college football where maybe that nickelback, a star-type position, which what Georgia expects Tykee Smith to potentially play, that's not always a strong cover guy for every program in the country. But when you add someone like Smith, who did big things for West Virginia a year ago, from a kind of an X's and O's standpoint, how important is it to make sure that you do kind of, have a lockdown guy in that fifth defensive back role and all the other things that Georgia asked that star guy to do, also to think about run coverage, things like that? How important is it to have a veteran player who's played at a high level, who can truly cover, just given some of the high-powered offenses Georgia has to face, being strong in that fifth defensive back role, or potentially safety there as well, but in a lot of cases as that kind of fifth defensive back? How important is it to have a strong guy there in that spot?
Well, three wide receiver sets has become the norm. I mean, that is your base offense for most of the teams you face, if not more. So to have three good cover skills players on the field at any given time is almost mandatory. They're flirting with the idea and getting reps for Adam Anderson, a guy who brings a unique skill set of athleticism and length and pass rush ability. And trying to see if they can utilize that athleticism in space just as much as getting after the quarterback in that star role. But to be able to have the flexibility and really address a need to have a third really good cover corner on the field, I think it's huge. I think this is a big-time add just because of the way offenses are deployed now. And for his pedigree coming in, he's got the game-time experience, and not just game-time experience. He was productive in that role. All-American honors and a couple turnovers, which is something that any defense should be excited about because he's got ball skills. So really big pickup, and I think it unloads some of the burden. I know as Georgia fans, the expectations are always high, and rightfully so, I think, this year. But it was certainly a position of concern, and I think guys like Keely Ringo and Jalen Kimber should be really excited because, the pressure was already mounting, whether they felt it or not. The expectations are through the roof from the fan base for two, if not more, inexperienced players stepping in with unrealistic, probably at times, expectations of their performance from day one. So to have a guy come in to learn from A, and B, kind of share that burden, I think it's huge. I think it's a really big pickup for Georgia.
And don't you think it makes the job of, young defensive backs, the Jalen Kimbers, the Keely Ringos, the guys that Georgia's looking to work into the fold, or even a guy like Chris Smith as a safety, kind of taking the next step with his development. Some of these guys who are just, getting their sea legs under them a bit. Having a guy like Smith on the field with them take some of the spotlight off of them. You'd presume some of the pressure off of them. It just gives you a chance to grow into a role without every single thing you're doing being hyper-analyzed by people like me and Georgia fans. We all have a tendency to kind of look very closely at this kind of stuff. Doesn't Smith just – obviously he's taking some playing time from someone, so maybe from that standpoint, maybe they're not all thrilled about it, but, guys are still going to play. Georgia still rotates defensive backs pretty heavily, but all of a sudden now, guys are on the field with maybe just a little bit less pressure. I would think even the other defensive backs themselves have to be a little bit happy about this.
They should be, and mainly the cornerbacks. I think we've got enough game experience between Cine and Smith that they at least feel comfortable being on the field. Now with those calls and the transitions, Georgia at times has run a relatively complicated defensive system where there's a lot of communication that happens in the back end. You have to be on the same page, and I think there's times where we've seen when that's not executed well, where there's certain breakdowns and errors that just create opportunities for an offense. So it's something where you got to be able to be on the same page, and what better way to do that than with a veteran who's been in the fire. Maybe not in the Georgia system, but certainly has familiarity with Coach Adai as the defensive backs coach, and that kind of familiarity of, one, playing the game at a high level, and two, with your position coach, I think is a wealth of knowledge that the younger guys, it frees them, it liberates them when they get on the field and they're playing beside one another. The less time you spend thinking and the more time you spend playing, usually that's a good formula for success for a guy. If before the snap is even made, if you're busy trying to figure out what exactly you're supposed to be doing, you're probably not in a great position to execute that well. So I think it's a big addition to offload some of that stress for these younger players mentally, and give them opportunities to go out there and excel. So it's a big complementary piece that whether or not they're excited or more concerned about their playing time, in the long run, I think this is a big addition for their careers and how they assimilate onto the playing field.
We heard Kirby Smart talk about something again on Saturday. We've heard him say before that when it comes to evaluating how a scrimmage may have gone, sometimes he says hard to tell. It's either good news or bad news, depending on your perspective, when the offense gets the best of the defense or when the defense gets the best of the offense. As a former player who's kind of been through these things yourself, is it tough to tell who won a scrimmage, or is this one of those things where, no, it's fairly obvious to know what the takeaways are, and, behind the scenes, the conversation may be quite different than what's being had publicly about stuff like this?
Yeah, it's always the broad brush strokes that you can pretty clearly see right after a scrimmage. But, any good coach or player worth their salt, they want to get in and see the actual film. There's times where it looks really good on one side, and then you say, man, there was just a couple breakdowns, but we're close on the other. And, that knee-jerk reaction of, golly, we've just got so much to clean up, isn't always the case. And sometimes players just go out there and make plays, and it kind of covers up for all the errors that are occurring outside of the play that we saw. So he's right in that you want to get that full assessment and have time to break down the film. But usually you got a good sense right after the scrimmage as to who got the best of whom. So it's all part of the process, and the point of these scrimmages is to create that environment where the energy is ramped up, and you want to get as close to that game time feel and fervor that you experience on a Saturday, so that you can test guys and see where they're at and get that evaluation as to, there's a lot of players that look pretty good in 7-on-7, and when you're running around in T-shirt and shorts, But when you get there and you start to ratchet up the heat a little bit, that's when you can really evaluate where a player's at and what he needs to work on.
One of the things I thought was kind of interesting, Smart was talking about some of the guys getting a chance to play, and he said they were a little bit nervous. And obviously sometimes as fans we treat the idea of a scrimmage, it feels more official, taking place on a Saturday, which is the day you typically play. And, I think to some of us, we treat it different than a normal practice maybe. But it sounds like, according to Smart's on description, maybe some players treat it a little bit differently there as well. I mean, it's not G-Day. They're not fans in the stands, things like that. But, just as someone who's maybe been through these kinds of things before, what is it that makes it more different than kind of a normal practice, to the idea that if you are a young player and you haven't been through this kind of stuff a lot, you would be just a little bit more nervous? Where do you think that kind of comes from?
Well, it's intentional. I think the coaches try to create an environment that as closely resembles a game day as you possibly can. And, the monotony of a normal practice sometimes lulls you to sleep as a player that, maybe this isn't quite as important. But when you label something, we got a scrimmage day, and we're going to put it on a Saturday, and maybe we move it to Sanford Stadium. All these little things that seem minuscule in comparison. Golly, we've been practicing football for 2 weeks now, and banging on each other, and each one of these reps is important. And I seem to be going up against the same guy every time. But now we've called it something different. We've put the plays in a different order and moved the location, and it feels different. And it's intentional, because the practice sometimes lulls you into a groove that maybe you're not competing at that same level, and your focus isn't quite as acute as they want. And creating these opportunities that, this time of year they call it a scrimmage, and it ratchets up the intensity a little bit. And I think it's a good thing. You want the players to kind of feel, those younger guys especially, to feel those butterflies now, so that when the Saturday rolls around where it's against a different opponent, it's less foreign to them.
Yeah.
And they've already felt that energy and that buzz of, man, this is important stuff.
Let me finish with this. Speaking of important stuff, I certainly thought it was important on Friday on the DawgNation video channels to see more of your evaluations of players in this roster for our DawgNation Freeze Frame series. And really a great look at Georgia safety Lewis Cine. Now, we talked a lot about secondary at the beginning of our conversation here, John, but the one guy who has a good bit of what Georgia doesn't have enough of right now, experience and, high-level play, Cine is certainly an example of that. Maybe not as much of a, like a coverage-type guy as maybe what Georgia needs other places, but certainly as an enforcer, as a safety, Georgia would seem to be in good hands with Cine and kind of keeping a tradition of leadership at that safety position that includes LeCount, J.R. Reed before him, and it's been an important spot there for Georgia. For the folks who haven't seen the full episode yet of DawgNation Freeze Frame looking at Lewis Cine, give us a little bit of a thumbnail sketch of what you think Georgia has in this very impressive safety here for 2021.
He's a crowd pleaser to me. He's a guy that plays super physical and is athletic. He's that long, rangy athlete that doesn't mind getting his nose dirty, gets in the box well, he closes well, and then has the athleticism and skills to execute on the back end when he's asked to play that deep safety role. So just a guy with development across the board, what we've seen over these past 2 years, that, whether it's because of names like Richard LeCount, and then he's been a younger player. Now he's become this veteran in that back end, and someone that I think is going to become that household name in this secondary because of the way he plays. I mean, it's fun to watch, breaking down that film, watching, preparing for that segment on Friday. He's a guy that doesn't mind coming up and hitting you. And, we highlighted a couple different ways he's done that, whether it's covering the receivers that are coming across the middle or the way he comes up and closes in the run game. He's one of those enforcers that any defense would love to have on that back end.
He is a terrific player, and it was a terrific evaluation of Cine on the Dog Nation video channels going back to last week. Make sure you check that out on Facebook, YouTube. I think it's on Instagram, all the Dog Nation video stuff. You can find our latest edition of Dog Nation Freeze Frame with John Stinchcomb breaking down exactly what Georgia has and seen. We'll see you back here this upcoming week, Friday at 3 p.m. for another episode of Dog Nation Freeze Frame there as well. John, thanks for being here on Dog Nation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia today. Certainly appreciate your time. Hope you have a great week. Hope you had a great Easter, and I'm sure enjoying some springtime stuff with your kids here this week. So thanks for sharing some of that time with us here as well.
It's a great time of year. Go Dogs.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Great time indeed. Boy, what a wonderful Easter I had yesterday. Chance to kind of be with some family again this year in a way we were not able to do a year ago. In person for church. Just, so much in life now better than it was a year ago. People a little healthier, safer. I know a lot of my family, vaccinated and kind of enjoying life in that sense. And so it's a great thing to be able to see. And so for all those of you who were able to enjoy yesterday there as well, I'm certainly glad that you did and happy to have you with us as a part of the program here today. Also coming up in about 5 or so minutes, I had a chance to be a part of something on Saturday that I don't think I'll ever forget. Just a really great time to honor, the great former UGA coach Vince Dooley. I'm going to tell you about that coming up in just a couple of minutes, so stick around with us for that. Before we roll into our SEC Through, let me also say this real quick. One of the things we believe in on our program is the idea of second chances. We're very slow to condemn really anybody. I just am very thankful for second chances in my life, the ones that I've gotten, and the way in which I'm able to use those to kind of get to a better place than maybe I'd been before. And we're just kind of a believer in that in general. It's one of the reasons why I love the work that's being done right now by my friends at Second Chance Law. It's secondchance.law online that you can kind of find them out there today. What they're going to do for you is going to help you clean up your record and erase potentially some old convictions you might have. A lot of this is related to kind of some new Georgia laws that are in place that allow certain convictions to be kind of restricted off of your criminal history. And obviously, a process like that can be a little bit confusing. It's hard to know exactly what that is. Well, that's what secondchance.law can help you with. They've kind of sort of whittled all this down to a pretty simple free quiz, and you can take it, answer those questions, and learn all about this. It only takes a few minutes. You can find out if you're eligible or not, and you can be told how you can become eligible if you're not quite in that situation as of yet. They really want to help you. They're dedicated to helping you. It improves your employment opportunities, housing opportunities. So much of what you're able to do can be made better by taking advantage of the second chance that my friends at Second Chance Law want to provide for you, secondchance.law online. To make matters even better, the partners Double Dog, means two-time graduate University of Georgia, former Redcoat, and a listener to us here at Dog Nation Daily dating back to 2015. We first got things all set and run. So it's always nice to do business with folks who love UGA and support us here at Dog Nation. That's what Second Chance Law will do for you. So find them online. It's secondchance.law. Secondchance.law. If you've had issues in the past, they can help you kind of get that cleaned up, maybe get that off your record, and all of a sudden you can have a whole lot more opportunities available for you once you do that. So check out secondchance.law online, and they'll take really good care of your day. It's great to be able to tell their story here on our program. What's not so great to tell, but I guess honesty compels us to admit, it sounds like Alabama quarterback Bryce Young had a good day at the Bama scrimmage on Saturday, reportedly throwing 4 touchdown passes during the spring and the spring scrimmage for the Crimson Tide. And here's what I always say, that, Alabama also, I started the show by talking about, Georgia's occasionally secretive type program. Alabama kind of somewhat the same way. Boy, when there's good news to be had, it always seems to leak out, right? I mean, there's always, a leak out when it comes to good news. If Bryce Young threw 4 interceptions, my guess is we're hearing nothing. But 4 touchdowns, boy, the world's hearing about it. I know Alabama put out some highlights and things like that. So a lot of bragging going on for the Alabama quarterback situation. I've said this before, and I'm going to stick by it, that it is not a non-issue that Bama is, to use double negative, that Bama's replacing its offensive coordinator, replacing its quarterback, replacing its Heisman Trophy winning wide receiver. These are all significant issues that must be paid attention to. But guys who are stepping up, John Mechie in a receiver role and kind of a more expanded role than he was a year ago. Bryce Young at quarterback. All these guys are talented guys. Bill O'Brien, the new offensive coordinator, former NFL head coach, so high credentials for the replacement here for Steve Sarkisian. But watching what happens with Alabama offensively is still a big deal. It's not a guarantee that you just replace all of that and you just kind of go humming right along. The early returns from spring are good, though, for Bryce Young. You have to be honest and admit here. But it's just, kind of one of those things where when there is good news, boy, that always seems to leak out of these programs, even in these closed-door scrimmages. You hear about the good stuff, and apparently Bryce Young had some of that going back to Saturday. Thought it was interesting that Arkansas coach Sam Pittman has talked a little bit about one of the things we talked about on last week's show. Mike Gundy, the Oklahoma State coach, saying he'd like to play A&M or Arkansas or one of these teams in kind of a scrimmage game, a spring game against a team other than themselves, not an intra-squad scrimmage, but an opponent. And Pittman didn't completely shoot down the idea when he was asked about that this weekend, saying that, playing a team that you're not looking to play in like the next 5 years might be kind of fun. You wouldn't necessarily play someone that you're maybe slated to play again really soon, but playing someone like that, I still don't think this is ever going to happen. I just don't think there's going to be as much of an appetite for that at the institutional level. But it is interesting to hear, Gundy's a fairly well-known guy. Pittman's certainly a well-known guy. All talking about, maybe if we did play somebody, wouldn't be quite so bad. So it's nice to know the conversation is taking place, even if the actual, the idea of this actually coming to fruition at any point in time, I don't quite see that taking place, but it's kind of nice to know they're talking about that. Interesting news coming out of Clemson. This is not good news for the Tigers, and I'm going to butcher the name, and I apologize, but Tykee Smith, the backup quarterback for Clemson, apparently suffered an Achilles injury during practice on Saturday, the spring game on Saturday for the Tigers. This, I was not quite aware of how thin Clemson is in its quarterback situation in terms of its overall quarterback depth. Now, Dabo Swinney's kind of downplayed this a little bit because, referencing, after Kelly Bryant transferred out of the program in 2018, he said, listen, we were also thin that year at quarterback there as well. But with Fomenchun's injury here kind of coming on the heels of, obviously DJ Uiagalelei stepping into the starting role now with Trevor Lawrence on his way to the NFL, Clemson's just a little bit thin at the quarterback spot right now, not getting good news off its spring game with the Achilles injury to its quarterback. And by the way, for Georgia fans who kind of think their program is kind of the only one that ever deals with stuff like this, obviously multiple wide receiver injuries, even though a couple of those have turned out not to be too serious. Clemson, an example here, that they have also dealt with a pretty significant injury here too, this time to a backup quarterback. So there is that. Finally, there's this national championship game set for tonight between Gonzaga and Baylor. I'm like everybody else. What I saw from Gonzaga and UCLA on Saturday, really one of the thrilling college basketball games of certainly any time in recent memory. And for those of us who grew up with March Madness, really in the the era in which that was coming into so much prominence. This was such a throwback to that with the buzzer beater. Really good stuff from our buddy Connor Riley at DawgNation.com, looking at Jalen Suggs as a football recruit. The fact that he was offered by Georgia and some other big-time programs. Kind of a neat story to see him ending up there at Gonzaga playing basketball, hitting the game winner. Should be a fun title game tonight, but boy, it's going to be hard for anything to live up to what was just an amazing semifinal game from Saturday and a terrific throwback for those of us who loved college basketball and kind of that era of the 80s and the 90s when this tournament was becoming such a favorite for so many people. This was one of those kinds of games on Saturday. It was a great thing to be able to see. We'll make that your SEC through. And here on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, want to take a minute to describe what I was able to be a part of on Saturday. And I'm going to write a story about this at DawgNation.com. It's going to be up today. But what an amazing honor for me to be a part of a ceremony for the legendary former Georgia coach and athletic director Vince Dooley, who on Saturday was inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame. Coach Dooley had served in the Navy going back to his time prior to being a head coach at Georgia. We got a little bit of a video that we'll show for you this there as well. Coach Dooley had served in, I said Navy, I meant to say Marines, had served in the Marines going back to his time prior to being a Georgia coach there in the early 1960s, was also in the reserves, for several years after that. And he, along with a whole host of other, and there's just no other way to say it, true heroes, men who, gave their life for their country. Many killed in action and wounded in battle. And Coach Dooley, to have his story told there alongside theirs, of course, Coach Dooley's kind of taken some of those military ideas with him into his time as Georgia's coach. He's obviously a military historian in some ways, has written books about military battles and things like that, and obviously a proud patriot and a lover of our country. And to see him honored as a Georgia Military Veteran Hall of Fame inductee at a beautiful, beautiful ceremony here this past weekend weekend. I was lucky enough to be a part of that. I'm going to write more about it, tell you more about it there at DawgNation.com, but I at least wanted to show you a little bit of video of Coach Dooley getting his medal and getting a beautiful plaque and framed photo. Just an incredibly nice thing to see. And in addition to what I saw from Coach Dooley, as I said before, the stories of many of the other inductees, you're just blown away by it. I mean, my dad was a Vietnam vet. My grandfather was a Korean War vet. My other grandfather was, World War II era, a veteran. So this has always been really important to me. But to be able to hear those stories and be in that room and or I should say that amphitheater area and just have that experience, I am just really grateful that I got a chance to see that, and it's really cool the honor that Coach Dooley had. Obviously, a lot of his former players were on hand for that. It was great to see so many of them come back to support him. This was just a really good day on Saturday as the legendary former coach Vince Dooley inducted into the Georgia Military Veterans Hall of Fame for his time there in the United States Marines. And how much is that a cool thing for Georgia fans to know that Coach Dooley, in addition to being a great former coach, also served his country there as well. On the way out the door, let me say this. Big thanks to our friends at Merriweather and Tharp for being a big part of what we do here. Your source for Georgia divorce. You can find them online, theatlantadivorceteam.com. Question about the divorce process, they've got answers for you. Bob and the whole team over there, big dog fans. They love supporting UGA, but they also have dedicated their lives to taking care of folks who find themselves dealing with the divorce process right now. So please make sure you check them out, theatlantadivorceteam.com, your source for Georgia divorce that'll get you in touch with Merriweather and Tharp. And as we say goodbye here today, I want to give a quick Easter-themed golden shoe. I thought this was kind of fun from UGA over the weekend. Good job by their editing department. How about UGA in the doghouse with the... I don't know why I think this is so funny, but I do think this is pretty entertaining. UGA in the doghouse, get the Easter bunny ears on. Good Photoshop edit there on that. Got the Easter baskets going. Very nice job. Josh Brooks sharing this on Twitter. Happy Easter from the dogs. The social media team for UGA, good work, doing great work there on that. By the way, speaking of doing good work, good luck to the UGA women's softball team today, trying to take a series finale against Florida, trying to win that series there. They've been going back and forth over the course of the weekend, so we'll root for them on that. By the way, Gator Hater Countdown, speaking of those lousy, stinking Gators, how about 208 days from right now? 208 days. Georgia goes back to Jacksonville. We think they get a win over Florida, get some revenge. We'll see you tomorrow at DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And on video, time now for our R.S. Andrews cool down. The RS in R.S. Andrews stands for Rapid Service. They're going to show up quickly to deal with your issue related to air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. You can certainly trust R.S. Andrews to be able to do that for you. And so with that in mind, as you check them out at rsandrews.com, I will check you out on here on Facebook and YouTube. We'll take a lot of your comments here today. James Tripp Payer on Facebook saying, I believe our dogs are going to continue where they left off. We're going to be surprised in a good way. Boy, James, I know a lot of Georgia fans kind of hoping that you turn out to be right about that. I mean, here's what you have if you're Georgia. You've got a schedule that would seem to be, as favorable as an SEC schedule plus college football, perennial powerhouse Clemson can be. But after the game against Clemson, I think most fans would say, Georgia expects to be a fairly prohibitive favorite in most of those games. Now, listen, anything can happen. Georgia, lost a game to South Carolina a couple of years ago. It was also a pretty sizable favorite but the schedule lines up for you. It's just a matter of, do you have everything in place that gives you a chance to win those games? And even with the George Pickens injury, the wide receiver situation still has a chance to be okay, whether it be new guys who are emerging or veterans who are ready to take it to the next level or whatever else. You still have a chance. Obviously, by bringing in Tykee Smith there as a defensive back, that gives you more opportunities. And who knows, maybe Georgia's not even done when it comes to the transfer portal related to all this kind of stuff. So optimism, I think it's well placed. I don't think there's any doubt about it. Now, Georgia fans have kind of been there before with optimistic during the regular season. It ends up not quite being what it's supposed to be. We understand all of that, but I think your words are well taken here. Bob McKay says you always have to have some luck to win a national championship. That's the one thing dogs can't seem to get in a huge, meaningful game, and that's true. Luck is a factor in football. Georgia fans, can cite the moments in which they maybe dealt with bad luck, but, it's possible to have good luck there as well. Maybe this year Georgia will actually get some of that. Phil Rogers says if you beat Clemson, you could be 7-0 coming to Jacksonville, and there's No doubt about that. You definitely could be. Definitely could be. And that's, I think, what's all at stake here. Somebody mentioned the weird story around Tennessee. Yeah, I'm going to hold off on that one for right now. I definitely saw that. But I'm going to hold off on that. I'm going to hold off on that for now. Matt Rukvina says everybody's kind of hitting the road. I guess he means kind of post-Easter there, so I hope you all had a great time. Good to see Tennille Calvino checking in today. Nice to see that. Barry Tenahan says DB was our biggest need. What is our next target position that needs vast improvement? By the way, Connor Riley going to check in here for a moment.
I know commenters don't like when I take time away from them, but did you see what Lincoln Riley posted yesterday? I'm stunned this didn't make it on the show.
I was going to do it. For those of you that don't know, Lincoln Riley, who not always my favorite guy, posted a picture. Maybe we should have done this of the very dry brisket. Some of the comments in response to Riley's, just talking about just like, it looked like beef jerky. It was the driest brisket you've ever seen in your life. Some of those comments were so funny. Like, my personality, my sense of humor is like very dry, sarcastic sense of humor. Some of the stuff that people were putting to Riley, they were just absolutely eviscerating him. Maybe we should have shown that today, but it was really funny.
I have no doubt that he was the one that actually cooked that brisket.
I do too. I don't like people, being unnecessarily mean on social media. It's not my favorite thing, but I'm also very much against the people who have to feel like they have to take a picture of everything they eat and put it up. But so in this particular case, I guess I'll allow it, but it was not a pretty picture of meat, and he just got roasted for it.
If Oklahoma had played in some closer games against big SEC teams, we could maybe question his clock management skills, but we have no idea what those look like. So, this brisket can't really help us all that much.
You got to find this, y'all, if you haven't seen it. Some of the stuff that people were saying to him was just so funny. Oh my gosh, it was funny. We maybe should have mentioned that today. All right, let's see what else is going on. Chase Barbie says April's going to be a great month for UGA. It very well could be. Brian Jones, others asking about Tykee Smith's status. So let me see if I can do this correctly. And, Connor, you may have to check my police work on this. So he still has to be granted eligibility, but that's essentially a foregone conclusion now because we're about to have, free transfer. We're about to just, like, if you didn't think we had free transfers before, we're about to have free transfers, and he's not an SEC transfer, so there's no immediate prohibition. So it's essentially a given that he's going to be eligible for Georgia, but he can't, practice right away because of the fact that well, actually, I guess he could practice. When is he going to practice then? Because you can practice without being eligible. So when is he going to practice?
He's set to arrive at Georgia in May, so he will be here over the summer. He's going to finish the semester at West Virginia. He's got 3 years of eligibility left. Something tells me he will not be here for all 3 of those years.
Sure. So, he can practice without being eligible, but he's got coursework to finish up, so he won't be doing that until then. But May is plenty fine to get him to arrive there. Thank you, sir. I'm going to go to YouTube in a minute. Hugh Nash says Tykee Smith is a huge get. Ups the competition in the DB room. If we get the Clemson DB, watch out. Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't close the door on that completely. The idea that Darian Kendrick could still be in play. I know people know about the misdemeanor charges that he's supposedly facing in South Carolina, but as I said before, that is not enough to say, well, I definitely don't want him. And the reason why I say this is because I'm not the one that's doing the research on any of that kind of stuff. I'm not, I'm just not one to drop the axe on somebody and say, oh, that's it. This guy's got no chance with me. I don't do that really for anybody. I said before, there was another SEC player that's allegedly gotten in a little bit of trouble. We didn't tell that story in the show today either. We are not quick to drop the hammer on people. We're just not. We're just not. And so, I'm going to extend that grace to other players. I'm going to certainly do that for guys that might have a chance to come here to Georgia. Phil Rogers asking about Darian Kendrick. That's kind of what we're talking about here to say, Georgia's got the roster availability if it wants to also bring in Kendrick, and that's all based on its own evaluations. Georgia's going to kick the tires on these guys, and that's, by the way, true even if there's not publicly available stuff. If everybody was just happy Georgia, they're not going to go into the transfer portal anyway. So there's always going to be, some sort of he said, she said stuff involved with everybody that eventually lands in the portal. And so every, coach has got to do his due diligence on all that. Robert Barnes, I ain't going there with a 10-foot pole, but I'm glad to see you checking in. I'm going to leave that one all the way alone, but I'm glad to see you checking in. Gerald Harmon on Rick Gilbert. I mean, I don't know that what you're saying is true, but it wouldn't surprise me, Gerald. I mean, I've always kind of viewed that as a potential possibility. Chad Buchanan says, I feel a lot better about our back end now with the addition of Smith. Yeah, I mean, to me, it's like I said before. It's like, okay, if you've got wide receivers, you got, you guys ever play or, in the marching band, you got like your first chair trumpet. If the first chair leaves, then everybody has to slide over a chair. And all of a sudden, everybody's job just gets a little bit harder. Well, that's what happens when a guy like Pickens gets hurt. Well, it's the exact opposite for defensive back. All of a sudden now everybody's in a bigger chair because of the fact all the guys have left. But when you bring in a guy like Tykee Smith, now you can kind of, in terms of responsibility, things like that, now you can kind of slide back over a chair. And it's just easier, right? I mean, you want guys to be able to ease their way into competition, not, just can be completely thrown to the wolves because, I don't know, people have a tendency. One of the things that kind of aggravates me about fans sometimes, if you'll allow me to be candid, is fans are desperate to see a guy play. Why is so-and-so not playing? Why is so-and-so not playing? Then he plays, has one bad game, and they never want to see him play again. It's just like the entire news cycle gets so accelerated of fans who are impatient for anybody who, takes a little bit of time to get on the field. And then when the guy does play, it's, well, this guy, sucks. Let's see, somebody else out there. All of it, it's just all way too accelerated. It's just all way too accelerated. Give guys a chance to slowly work their way in and then slowly acclimate it once they start playing. And the presence of successful veterans makes that process a little bit easier. So I like Tykee Smith because I think that he can play, but I also like Tykee Smith because I think it makes it a little bit easier for everybody else to play too. Scotty Gorup says the Tykee Smith sliding in was pretty quiet this weekend, and I like it. Yeah, there have been a little bit of, chatter going back to last, like say few days, related to some of that kind of stuff. But all in all, it's just like very businesslike, right? It's like Georgia looked around, said, oh, we need help at defensive back. Hey, here's an All-American that our new defensive backs coach used to coach. Why don't we just go get that guy? I mean, sometimes it really is just that simple. William Gleaton says, how about info on the young wide receivers showing out at practice? So we talked about Adonai Mitchell a little earlier. Justin Robinson's a guy we've talked about a couple times on the show as of late. A lot of that coming from Terrence Edwards because Terrence just knows Justin really well. I mean, the one thing I'll say about Justin is I think it's really helpful. I mean, once again, to be very overly simplistic for a moment, it's like there's an old joke about like Bill Walton back when he used to do NBA games on NBC. It's like he had like the most obvious, and now he's kind of gone off the deep end, but he had the most like obvious analysis possible. It helps to be tall when you're playing this game. Well, if it helps to be tall when you're playing basketball, it helps to be strong when you're playing football. And one of the things I think that Robinson has going for him, he's just strong. He's very, very strong. You go back and watch high school film. This is a physical receiver. You see him in person. He's in good shape. He's strong. And so I think one of the things that helps Robinson here is the fact that he's just kind of a beefy dude. And part of George Pickens' repertoire was always his physical strength. I mean, his strength was a valuable part of what he brings to the table. So yeah, I mean, I'm happy with some of what I'm hearing from Justin Robinson. The idea of so-and-so looked great in the scrimmage. I take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. Any of that kind of stuff. I take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. The one thing that I don't take with a grain of salt usually is like the third scrimmage of the summer when like a lot of the McGill whatnots are there because there's a lot of them. And so that's kind of like the wisdom of crowds. So many people saw the scrimmage that the so-and-so looked good in the scrimmage stuff becomes a little bit easier to validate because you have, in some cases, dozens of people saying the same thing. It's not hard to get in touch with a lot of people who are there. Some of these other scrimmages, there are eyeballs on the scrimmage, but it's not the same number of people. It's just a smaller group of people. So I'm always a little skeptical of so-and-so looked great in the scrimmage. But that one like McGill scrimmage in the summer, I'll put a little more stock into because several hundred people see this, and it's just easy to talk to them. They're not hard to find. So there's that. Over here on YouTube, DMart42 says, I wanted Andrew Booth. It's kind of funny. DMart bringing up Andrew Booth. Who was it I saw brought up Andrew Booth? Somebody was on social media talking about Booth the other day, saying that it looks like he may be ready to show out for Clemson. So that is one of those guys that Georgia, kind of wanted the mattresses on, and Clemson won that recruiting battle. You shake their hand, you wish them well, and it sounds like Booth may be ready to be a pretty good player. Seems like he may have had a pretty good, I guess that's what it was. He had a pretty good spring game, I guess, and now looking like he may be ready to be a big-time player there in that Clemson secondary. But yeah, Booth, certainly one of those guys. Foster Moss says, who you got, BA, Baylor or the Zags? I'm rolling with Baylor. Did you know their guard, Mitchell and Richard LeCount, was high school teammates? I did not know that. It's kind of cool. Boy, there are always a lot of Georgians. Always a lot of Georgians doing big things for the teams in the NCAA tournament. Kind of interesting to see. So I've been Gonzaga all the way, but we did say on, I guess, Friday's show that quietly Baylor had really been humming along. What they did in the first half to Houston was just uncivil. I mean, uncivil. So it's kind of funny. It's like I don't have any real money on any of this, but if I did, would I hedge it a little bit with Baylor? Dramatic win for Gonzaga, maybe more interesting, a team that you would not have thought should have been close with Gonzaga, found a way to make it close all night long. And the honest truth is Gonzaga may have gotten bailed out by the officiating late in regulation there. So I've been saying Gonzaga, but I would probably, if I had a futures play in Gonzaga, would I hedge that a little bit with a little bit of a straight up play on Baylor tonight? I might hedge it just a little bit. That Baylor team's pretty good. So I think it's a great game. This is one of those classic example of great game that really nobody cares about. The ratings for this will be awful. I don't really care about that. You probably don't either. But the ratings of this will not be good. But I like to study sports history. We haven't seen an undefeated team in the championship game since 79 maybe, and we haven't seen an undefeated team finish the season since 76. Yeah, obviously one of the big moments of my life. I mean, talking about huge sporting moments, kind of thing that, for those of you who are close to my same age, everybody remembers, is when the undefeated UNLV team that I thought was just unbeatable. I just did not think they could be beaten. When they got beat by Duke in the national semifinals, 91, I think it probably would have been. That was such a huge moment for me. And so, I mean, it's hard, even playing in the West Coast Conference. When you had six tournament games, everything else, it's hard to go undefeated. But that's what Gonzaga's going to do tonight. I think it's going to be a fun game. I do, and I think it should be a great. Look, we didn't have a one shining moment last year because of obviously the absence of the tournament. My kids, we always like to sit down and watch one shining moment together. We'll record it and watch it the next morning usually. So I'm just happy to have all of this back in our lives tonight. Happy to have it all back. Jay Shipe says, do you like my new profile picture? I dedicated. Oh, Lord, Jay. Going after Cody Ledoux here. Christy unhappy with the Georgia basketball situation right now. They've had a lot of transfers. And, I kind of wondered aloud the other day about, some of the stuff that's going on in college basketball right now. And I'm going to still kind of withhold judgment on some of this. I'm just not really comfortable saying that what's happening at Georgia is unique to Georgia, with obviously, Tamani Kamara going to the transfer portal the other day to go along with a host of other Georgia players, and what is just, frankly, running amok in the sport right now. I mean, I think we're over 1,000 play. I think it maybe as high 1,200. We're like 1,200 players in the transfer portal for basketball right now. And I do realize that so many of these tournament teams are essentially built through the transfer portal now. I do get all that. That's just kind of what the sport has become. But my gosh, is that a good thing? I know I'm, probably traditional to a fault sometimes in this kind of stuff, but man, all that bouncing around, I just don't know. Bob Zambler. Oh, by the way, it's good. First of all, it's good to see Bob in the comments section. Bob is a great guy. How about this? He says he was at the 79 Bird Johnson final, and that was awesome. Boy, you're talking about a great thing to be able to see that you saw. That's really cool. That is really, really cool. I mean, can you imagine being there? And you almost wonder, So that was clearly history in the moment because Magic was such a big deal, and what Bird was doing Indiana State was such a big deal because Bird had already been drafted by the Celtics prior to that season, which is kind of strange. But so Bird was already a very big deal, even back then with the Sycamores. So you already knew that you were in something like sports history because there was so much talk about both Johnson and Bird that year. But obviously, looking back years later, could you have ever known it was going to be really one of the most significant games in the history of the sport? It's pretty amazing. So my Final Four history is I was at the Florida-Ohio State championship game in Atlanta a few years ago. And listen, I was obviously rooting against Florida and really felt like that Thad Matta that night got grotesquely outcoached, not used Greg. I mean, people think Greg Oden's a punchline, but when Oden was healthy in that tournament, he was a real force. That's one of my all-time, everybody's got these hot takes that turn out to be hilariously wrong. I was on the Greg Oden hype train as much as anybody could have ever been. When he was healthy, go back and watch that tournament. He was very healthy, and Mata did not use him effectively that night against Florida, and it made me furious because I obviously wanted Florida to lose, but I was there for that. I was also at the Final Four in Detroit a few years later, the one that Michigan State was in. They had like 70,000 people for that semifinal game, and it was North Carolina Villanova. I was there at that Final Four for that. Richard D says, who's your wish for the next transfer portal player for Georgia? I'll go either another defensive back or a wide receiver. I could see either one of those being okay. Not that I don't like the wide receivers that Georgia has, but it's just another position where experience kind of matters. Back over here on Facebook for a moment. Miriam Martin Corbin, I like this. 35th anniversary of her 35th birthday on Easter with all my family together. Miriam, first of all, happy birthday to you and happy Easter, and I'm so glad you and your family got to spend some time together. What a great thing. What a great thing that is. Shelton Tucker on the subject of Gonzaga. Let's see what else is going on. Douglas Lambert talking about Georgetown Villanova. Yeah, I think I saw this where the shooting percentage for Gonzaga UCLA was the highest percentage in a Final Four game since Georgetown Villanova in 1985. I think both games above 58% from the field, which is not an easy feat. If you've watched some of the other tournament games, I think you get a sense of how not easy that is to do. But yeah, so that's also part of that history there as well. Randy Hall was also at that same Final Four in Detroit. Actually, I think this may have been a different Final Four. Was UCLA in that Final Four? Maybe they were. I didn't quite remember that. Richard Sheffield would love to see Georgia recruit a bathroom designer for Sanford Stadium out of the portal, maybe at some point in time. All right, one or two more. We're getting ready to go. G. Grace Bama Boy and the subject of Georgia basketball. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, look, I was a season ticket holder for Georgia basketball when Tubby was here in, say, 96, and when Herrick was here. And people can laugh about Herrick if they want to. When Jim Herrick was the coach of Georgia, those games were so much fun. With Jarvis and Jonas and Rashad Wright and Ezra Williams. That gym was full, rocking. SEC was pretty good back then. Just the whole thing was just really, really fun. And I know people like to make fun of Herrick, whatever else. I'm telling you right now, I had a blast at those games. And, they didn't always do as much in the tournament as you want them to. I know they got upset by Southern Illinois, and then the next year they didn't go. But I had a great time back then. That was so much fun. So I'm one of those people that would love Georgia basketball to be back humming again because, I was there back when it was in the Tubby age, Sweet 16 run in 95, the Herrick age, just super entertaining basketball. So I wish it was better, and I hope that it will be. I can't wait for it to be. Cody Ledoux taking a shot at UGA. What else is new from Cody there on that? All right, we're going to get ready to go. DMart42 says too much basketball talk today. I apologize for that, DMart. I apologize for that. All right, let's get ready to go here. All right, thanks for being here as part of our R.S. Andrews cool down today, with a little bit of basketball sort of sprinkled into the typical football talk. But we appreciate y'all being here for it. Make sure you check out R.S. Andrews online. As I said before, the R.S. stands for Rapid Service. R.S. Andrews will take care of your air conditioning, your heating, your plumbing, your electric needs. They'll show up on time. They'll do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. Also, check out AJC online, Atlanta News Now. Braves, not a great start to the season. I think today's scheduled game against Washington not going to take place. Looks like they're going to be back with the Nationals starting on Tuesday there. Washington's got some COVID issues. Falcons getting ready for the NFL draft. All kinds of stuff going on. Atlanta News Now, AJC.com. Make sure you check that out. Y'all have a great day. I'll see you back here tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. Have a great day, everybody. For more DawgNation videos, check out youtube.com/DawgNation.